that forget America, white America is an irredeemably racist country.
Banks created the entire crisis in Detroit. We lost 250,000 people in the last 8 years, and that 250,000 just didn't vaporize. They were driven out after being trapped into predatory, racist, high interest loans for their homes, mortgages. And they've been all the banks have been fined hundreds of millions each for these criminal, fraudulent activities. They've been fined. Nobody's been going to jail, but they've been fined by the federal government. But that money didn't come to Detroit to reverse what they did. So all these folks were driven out of their homes because they were trapped in these mortgages they couldn't pay. People said, well, why did the banks sell these loans or get the people in these loans? Because they made 8 times the profit, even knowing people would default on them in the future.
Former U.S. Attorney General Eric Holder, who's now back to his corporate law practice, defending white-collar criminals, gave his reason for not prosecuting banks. It's dangerous to prosecute offending banks because they're simply too big. Making arrests might lead to collateral consequences in the economy.
And of course in Detroit, when you leave your home, within days, if not hours, it is looted, stripped of the copper, of the windows, of everything of value.
My home was sold from up under me. My home was on auction and I didn't even know it. So in this time period, people had broken into the home and stole a lot of things. So I had to replace the furnace, heater tanks, doorknobs. A guy stopped me prior to me, while I was fixing on the home. And he would always ride past and said, well, you outbid me at the mortgage company. So I said, no, I didn't know that. So I pull up at the house and it's a guy sitting in a blue van. He said, do you live here? And I said, yeah. He said, well, do you know your house is being sold today on the auction? I said, no. He said, well, you need to get downtown to tell them to take your home off the auction. He said, because it's due into bid today at 12 noon. Wow. So I leave out and I rush downtown and I speak to someone at the tax office. Now, if you miss one payment off this payment plan, which the wrong payment plan that I was in anyway, that they can automatically put your house on the auction market and they don't have to even notify you. You knew it was a family that lived in this home. You watched us put this home back together. You rode up and down the street all the time and knew exactly what we were doing. And then you would come to me and say, you people should know how to act. You should know how to spend your money. You should know how to take care of your business. You should know how to pay your bills. Who are you to come here and tell me what I've done for this block? And how I've helped seniors out in my neighborhood. Or I've taken them groceries when they didn't have money or food. These are the things that I do in my community. I feed people when they need food. And for you to say that I'm gonna take care of my business. I'm deeply rooted here. I'm never going to leave. This is my community, this is my block, this is my street, and this community is my family. I'm going to stay here, and I'm going to continue to fight.
Stop tax foreclosures! Release the hardest hit funds! Stop tax foreclosures! Release the hardest hit funds! Stop tax foreclosures!
What we found out, blight is like a cancer. I mean, blight grows.
The whole idea of taking over the city was, it's the whole push to, now that the economy has crashed, the whole idea is with the shock doctrine is to scare people and put a lot of force on them and let them make them agree to unreasonable terms, really, and creating actually a false emergency.
Hands off our pensions! Hands off our pensions! Hands off our water! Hands off our water! Hands off the rec centers!
Try to get a very clear definition of the term blight, because that can be a vague and foggy definition and can have a lot of differences depending on who you are and where you're coming from, what your understanding is. And then once we had all of that crystal clear information, we made very specific recommendations as to what to do and how to go about removing it. And we did best practice visits in New Orleans.
Hey, these guys that went from I'm behind the scene to I'm the new crown me king. You know, I'm going from behind the scene to crown me king. These are the billionaires.
But democracy in these United States is not the same as it was.
It was like a Wild Wild West show. The assets that was taken in the facade that went on in the media, that coverage that saying, oh, woe is me, Detroit needs help. Let the white knight come in with this in his charger and save their black community. And so that's why Mr. Duggan came in a mysterious kind of way. So that was a challenger in Cobo Hall when I saw what would you call it, the Twilight Zone episode, where I went from station to station and saw that it was the same signature, of course. It was Mike Dugan. He was the write-in candidate.
But democracy is not giving us equity, and it's not protecting our lives.
And the money was just too much for the state to be able to just pass up. So the bond money was seized, and the elected school board was removed at that time. That school board was replaced then by a corporate board, which was contractors mostly, and it's very, very similar to, fast forward to now, what Governor Snyder is calling the Coalition for the Future of Detroit Schools. It's almost an identical playbook. It's mostly contractors and nonprofits who are being put up to replace the elected school board. It's an identical scenario. And it's the same reasons, the bond money and real estate, exactly the same reasons. And the casualties, of course, are the poorest children in Detroit.
And people say, how is the economy coming back? I've been telling folks, they're not coming back. If they cut your wages in half, how can they sell these houses? You can't buy a $100,000 house on a $12 job?
The city has lost literally every asset that it controlled. Garbage collection has been privatized. City workers have been laid off. The pensions have been reduced. The cutoff date to take back a portion of people's pensions was 2003. 30 years before 2003 was the election of Coleman Young, the first black mayor, which means that people who had their pensions, a portion taken back from the past, were overwhelmingly black. It also means that the pensions going forward were reduced. Their health care was taken and reduced.
You've reduced my pension. You've taken my health care away. You've gnawed away at my annuity savings fund, and you want me to survive?
We lost the city's park. Belle Isle Park was taken from us by the state. We lost the city's convention center, Cobo Hall, owned by the people of Detroit, taken. We lost the Detroit-Windsor Tunnel, taken. We lost the Detroit Institute of Arts, taken. We lost the Detroit Zoo, taken. We lost the Detroit Eastern Market, taken. We lost literally every asset that we had in control. And now, just recently, they took the water system, a multi-billion-dollar operation.
We will continue to fight on every level, in every way possible. We refuse to be robbed.
Senior citizens who didn't even make it through the fight. You know, they have strokes and die along the way because they're so stressed out about losing their homes after being there 30, 40, or 50 years. So it turned into a situation where, for me and my clients, it's not just an economic number. It's actually a quality of life and sometimes a life and death situation. And no one tends to view it from this perspective from the mainstream media or mainstream financial institutions, or even from the judiciary for that matter. What's going on with housing in Detroit is that, contrary to the mainstream media, the foreclosure crisis is not over for Detroit. And I mean mortgage foreclosure. It's only compounded with the tax foreclosures, and people are still losing their homes at an alarming rate.
We are now changing the subject. We're talking about the billboard. We're actually talking about the gentrification in Detroit.
Do we have Jason on the line? Okay, cool. Jason, you there?
Yes, I am.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us today, Jason, on Detroit in Black and White. I'm going to introduce you to the callers who may not be familiar with some of your work. You are an independent filmmaker, I believe from Shreveport, Louisiana. His previous film was called 7 a.m. It was about black entrepreneurship and empowerment. Well, he's back, folks, with Gentrified, Ethnic Cleansing, American Style. So, Jason, is gentrification the new colonialism? Do condos kill culture? Will black people be pushed out of Detroit? I think some of us might have seen the billboard that your company put up. It's at the John C. Lodge in 8 Mile, I believe. And, you know, 8 Mile has a whole history in the city of Detroit, right? You know, Vanessa and Byron. So, Jason, you've got a big documentary coming out, and the billboard talks about February 18th. Is that the date that it's going to drop here in Detroit?
Yes, ma'am. That is the date that we are going to be showing it in Detroit. And the reason why I chose where it is geographically is because that area is especially significant to those of you who live in the Detroit area, because you know that that's a boundary.
Right.
And I just felt that if the space was available, it was significant because it was something that would resonate with people. And the message needs to be blunt. It is not just a matter of being uncomfortable or building a new type of housing. This is ethnic cleansing, American style.
Well, what do you mean by that? I mean, that's a provocative word, ethnic cleansing. I mean, that engenders all types of reactions, visceral reactions. I mean, how are black people being ethnically cleansed from the Detroit area?
Because the problem is that we have, as black people, we have forgotten that we are still in an era of the unfinished business of slavery.
Okay.
The unfinished business of slavery is when your tools are done being used, you discard them. And yet we're still here. We are, as Dr. Claude Anderson, who I'm sure you all are familiar with, for years, we are an obsolete labor force. We're not needed anymore, yet we're still present. So those who see us as obsolete are now saying it is time to remove you. And black people have been waiting for a European Nazi-style cattle cars rounding up of people. That is not what's going to happen to us.
Jason.
What's going to happen to us is our economic displacement, which will demand your physical displacement.
Jason, you decided to put that sign out. It's very strategic, but I read where you had some kind of pushback of putting that sign up, the billboard up. Can you give us and the audience some background information as to what kind of pushback you had and how long did it take for you to get the billboard put up?
Well, To be totally honest, because the billboard is quite frank when it says black people are being pushed out of Detroit. I originally wanted it to say that black people are being ethnically cleansed. From in all the cities. I have billboards up around the country, Chicago, Philadelphia, Atlanta, other places. I'm still trying to get more.
They wouldn't let you put that up? They wouldn't allow that wording on the sign?
No, they would not allow that, and it took weeks of negotiating
Wow.
and other things to even get what you see there. So in reality, this is the tame version of what I really wanted. That's not even actually what I wanted. I actually wanted to say black people are being ethnically cleansed from Detroit. And I've got some markets where they won't even take the wording that you have up there in Detroit. They won't even accept it in some other markets.
This is Vanessa Moss, co-hosting the Adolph Mongo Show, Detroit in Black and White, with attorney Byron Pitts and attorney Tracy Martin. This hour we have Jason Black, who is responsible for the provocative billboard at 8 Mile and Lodge. We're going to defer to him. And callers, please hold on. The lines are lit up. Please hold on. We promise we'll get to you.
Byron has a question.
Let me jump in with one call. Jason, how you doing, brother?
Hello, sir.
Okay, let me ask. I'm just going to play devil's advocate here. Okay? I'm a litigator. I'm going to play devil's advocate, okay? What do you say to the folks, and I'm just asking you, not my position, what do you say to the folks that black folks have been leaving? Because I assume the position is that, listen, with the white mayor, with Mike Duggan, the new policies with Dan Gilbert and what have you, this sort of grouping of new people in Detroit are kicking out the folks who've been here for generations. What do you say to the folks that say, listen, people have been leaving Detroit since Coleman Young? With Coleman, there was 1 million residents there were 2 million residents in the 50s.
Yeah, we had 2.5 million.
After the riots, when I was born after the riots, you had about 1 million. By the end of the Coleman Young administration, you had about 600,000-700,000.
And we don't even have that now.
And you don't even have that now. So what do you say to those people who say, when I was growing up, you had a smattering of black folks in Southfield. Now Southfield's all black. You didn't have any black folks in Plymouth and Canton. Now it's all black.
Not in Plymouth.
Not in Plymouth, but you had a whole bunch of in Macomb County. I didn't go to Macomb County.
Well,
I still don't like to go.
Macomb Circuit Court has a complete demographic change when you go there, in terms of the people that go there. But what is the line between redevelopment and black flight? Because this city has had black flight. So what's the difference, Jason? Because that is a confusing issue.
What do you say to those people?
It's not very confusing at all. Follow the dollars. Southfield. I have one question to ask you about those areas. How much economics and socioeconomic power do they have?
Well, the mayor, but I think the question more is that because it seems the position seems to be, and I hear this, and I believe me, I used to live in D.C., and I went out to D.C. In October, and I saw the unbelievable turnaround off Georgia Avenue where Howard University is. I saw the turnaround. What do you say about people who it's not just economic development that's squeezing African Americans out of cities that we've lived in? It's the fact that black folks, because of crime and poor services, we've been leaving on our own for the past 30 years. I mean, I'm just asking you. I'm not challenging you. I'm asking you, what is your response to black flight? Because black folks don't like crime either. We don't like poor services either. We don't want to call the police and have them show up 2 hours later, and that those blacks that could leave left the city.
Well, these are all misnomers in a lot of regards because people do not actually come and ask us exactly why we do the things that we do. Usually they send white people to give those answers for you, if I may be blunt, in the era of Donald Trump. Wow. When you mentioned those names before, Dan Gilbert, Mike Ilyich, Mike Duggan, if I may be blunt here, I find it difficult to believe that those individuals have black people's best interests at heart. Simply by looking at them. For some strange reason, I just don't get the impression that they got into the positions they are because they're concerned about an 80% black area, about having our best interests at heart. I think they've got the interests of, quite frankly, people who look like them at heart, which is their want to do.
But yet and still, a lot of black people supported Mike Duggan. I mean, some people regarded him as a white savior of sorts.
I will address all of that, as a matter of fact. Let me deal with the question you asked with first, and then let me get back to Mike Duggan, because this all actually goes together.
Okay.
One of the problems that we're experiencing here, I'm not sure what numbers he was referring to before. The numbers that I've seen as far as the census and everything indicated in 1970, Detroit had a population of 1.7 million people. Today it's hovering around 600,000, and I've seen a report that says that you are due to lose another 100,000 people within the next 10 years. And in an 80% black city, that tells you that 1.2 million people that you've lost is mostly what? Practically all black people. Then the question becomes, okay, why did it happen? Now, everybody points to the collapse of the manufacturing industry, the auto industry. They point to the riots. As we point out in our documentary, we had some professors from Wayne State University point out the auto industry began declining in the 50s. So we can't really say that that's necessarily what was it. So what is it really? Well, the riots, do all those things play factors? Yes, they play factors, but here's my point. Dan Gilbert is buying up everything he can in downtown Detroit. Mike Ilyich is investing in downtown Detroit. Quicken Loans. These people are investing in downtown Detroit. You don't do that for a place that is losing people. You don't do that. You do that for a place that is going to gain money. Money doesn't grow on trees. It comes from people. You don't invest in a new hockey arena because you're losing people. You're investing because there is something there, and there will be. We as black people don't really understand what we're looking at here. One of the main reasons that Detroit has featured so prominently in my film is because you all are the epitome of what gentrification everywhere is going to be.
We're ground zero.
Well, no, you're more than just that. You are the quintessential example of the ideal.
Wow.
They're emptying out your city. You got skyscrapers, you got restaurant districts, you got a riverfront, you got all the amenities that I've seen in Manhattan and Virginia and Miami, except one thing, none of the congestion.
Okay.
Jason.
So many people that for the ones who have money, it's paradise down there. It was great. I felt free to breathe when I left Philadelphia in New York. I got to Detroit and I was like, this is great. The streets are clean, big skyscrapers, but there are none of the people except those of us who can afford to be here. And that is what they want.
Okay, Jason, we're going to go to a caller, and then this is Vanessa Moss. I have a question for you, but we're going to go to the caller, Calvin. Calvin has been waiting a long time. Thank you so much, Calvin. We're talking about...
I have a statement, but I'm just going to ask a question. What do you tell some of the young people? I be in the area, the people, young people my age, and I don't know why I keep calling myself young because I'm 50, but they're younger than me. But they have...
How old are you, Calvin? Are you a Gen X?
I'm 50. And, and it's left to them, but they're falling for the hype that Detroit is on the downcline. I'm on the Linwood, Dexter Way, plus I'm over 6 Mile, and they put the crime on us, and then they're just giving the houses up for taxes, and they work. I deal with jury worker people. I'm not talking about people. I'm like, and then they're going to go somewhere else. What advice you have to tell them? Because they think it's done. They think, oh, I don't live in Midtown. But I'm over in the University District.
Okay.
All them houses nice. There's not one vacant house on my block.
Well, I will tell you exactly.
Bridge and over by UAD, but I be talking to people there saying, oh, I'm getting ready to go here, go there. And they didn't buy the house. They got it from their mom and daddy.
Right. Calvin, let Jason...
work.
Calvin, let Jason answer your question or address your comment. Jason?
Simply put, Dr. Claude Anderson's prophecies are coming to pass in Detroit. Let me explain one simple sentence to you to answer what he just said. If you do not control the economic real estate of where you live, you can forget about controlling the physical real estate. Simple as that. We are trying to vote politicians to give us physical real estate and jury and education in colleges. That isn't going to work. Dan Gilbert isn't going to colleges. Mike Ilyich isn't going to politicians. They brought their economy with them. And you're never going to fix any of that. All those vacant houses, and people hear about the vacant lots and stuff and the houses for sale in Detroit, that's worthless to black people. And the reason it's worthless is I could give you all of that property. You will lose it within a couple of years. Why? Because the problem isn't getting the real estate. The problem is what are you going to do with it afterward? Mike Ilyich isn't buying real estate. He's buying it and then developing it. Where is our ability to develop it so that we can actually make it worth something? That's why your young people are leaving. That's why people don't have a problem with exiting the city. And these other people who are fewer in number but greater in income and wealth are coming in. That's the way it works.
Jason, you said that the young people are leaving, but, I researched gentrificationisms. And some of the words that come up or phrases that come up are yoga studios, grown-ups on skateboards, juice bars, artisanal anything, barefoot hipsters. Yes. $5 coffee, nannies in the park, vegan food, white people on bikes, artist lofts coming soon. I mean, these are things that we see in Midtown Detroit and downtown Detroit right now.
Right.
I would like your comment on what is called transportation gentrification. We've got something in Detroit, I'm sure you know because you're this documentary filmmaker who focused on Detroit, but it's the Q line. Now, people say the Q line is like a streetcar that goes to nowhere. I mean, who does that really serve? And why did the Q line just come in now? Care to comment about that?
Every major city in America, actually every metropolitan area, but every major urbanized city in America has a metropolitan planning commission, development commission, whatever they want to call it, but all of them have a 20-year plan. Most of us never go to City Hall to go see, by the way, what are your plans for the city in 20 years? Because they're there. I went to Chicago. Most people, when they saw Cabrini Green, and for those of you who remember the TV show Good Times, that was Cabrini Green.
Yes, right.
That they're redeveloping with all those things you just talked about, urban planning, plazas, shopping, things like that. And forgive me if I'm talking fast, but I know you're short on time. The reason for all that is because they have a plan. It's just like with the 2nd Avenue subway that they just opened in New York. They opened it halfway. It's supposed to go all the way to Harlem, but it didn't. Why not? Because they got plans. And there's only one question that you need to ask for subways, bus routes, grocery stores, subdivisions. There's only one question that you need to ask. Take a look at the people in the area surrounding it and ask yourself one question. Is this store, this subway line, this train being built for the people who currently live here? Or is this being built for someone who's not here?
Good question.
Right, good question. We're going to take another caller. Eric, you on the line with Jason Black? You have a comment or question? We're doing fine, thank you.
Yeah, I got a little quick comment. If they said there's going to be 38 schools closed, Snyder is behind this. He's going to be closing 38 schools, Detroit public schools. And if that's the case, and 25 of them are in Detroit, but the schools they're going to be closing are going to be in urban areas. So if they do that, the town becomes ghost town. So why would it come into Detroit if they're going to be closing the schools?
Well, I'm thinking, if based upon what Jason just talked about, that where are these schools closing in the city of Detroit? If they're not in these areas where gentrification is taking place, downtown, midtown.
Well, they're not closing the Taubman School. Now, that's in Midtown,
So, finance manager law. Don't you all have an emergency finance manager for your schools?
The reason they're closing.
Well, no,
not anymore.
Not anymore. We don't have an emergency manager anymore. We have.
It just happened.
Yeah, it just happened.
Well, no, what I'm saying is that, do you see that as part of the overall plan? We had one for your schools, you got one for the cities. 9 of the 11 areas have had emergency finance managers. 9 of them have been predominantly black.
Yes, absolutely. There's a connection.
So what does that tell you? When I say 20-year plan, that's what I'm saying. You have a president who says, I want to do as much damage in 4 years as I can before you all have an opportunity to recover. What Rick Snyder can do in 4 years, it will take you decades to recover from that. You'll be dealing with that, and they'll have new stuff launched on you already. So they're hitting you hard, they're hitting you fast, and making sure that you don't have time to recover.
But, Jason, what can we do?
Yeah, what
can people do?
Yeah, what is your answer? Because basically, it sounds like keeping it real sounds like an issue of bread and money.
Yeah.
People find an area, and it seems like here in the city of Detroit that, and let me tell you something, Coleman Young wasn't, the great Coleman Young. Coleman Young was trying to get people from all walks of life to move back into Detroit.
He was.
It's not just, Duggan or Kwame or Mayor Archer. Coleman Young wanted people. Now one of the things that Coleman Young did was he made sure that blacks had a seat at the table.
Right.
You know, when these decisions were being made, but to suggest that, you know, an area that's undeveloped, now you get somebody to develop it and put their own money in that pot that they're not going to want to return on that investment. I mean, how are you going to tell somebody to come invest in Detroit and then say, but you're not entitled to get a return on your investment? We're gonna keep it like it is.
Right. And to Byron's point, do black folks have a seat at the table when we're talking about gentrification?
That's the question.
Not
really.
Have a seat at the table.
That's the question.
Respectfully, that is not the question. The question is not, do black people have a seat at the table? The question is, are black people ready to accept that that's our table?
Oh,
good.
You don't beg people for a seat at something that belongs to you.
Wow.
If this were an 80% Jewish city, would they be saying we want a seat at the table? If this were Yonkers, New York,
no.
If this were El Dorado or a majority Miami or a majority Latino city,
Right.
would they be saying we want a seat at the table? No, this is our table, and the problem has been, respectfully, Coleman Young all the way to Kwame Kilpatrick, they refuse to even say this is a black city. So how are you ever going to fix the problem of the 80% when you are electing politicians who lie and say that this is not even a black city? This is a black city, and if we're going to fix its problems, you have got to concentrate on black people and what affects black people.
But don't you want it to be a vibrant, but real talk, Jason, don't you want it to be a vibrant black city? And I grew, let me tell you something, man. I grew up here in Detroit. And I grew up after the riots.
I know what
Detroit. There's nothing you can tell me about what this city was like growing up in the 70s. I loved it, but it was rough sledding. And if somebody's going to come in here, black or white, and help make it better, I can't say I'm mad.
Byron,
I don't want to be pushed out.
But Byron,
I'm not turning down
how come this redevelopment didn't happen while we were already here? I'm a Detroiter. We weren't good enough. How come we weren't good enough to have the Whole Foods come in and the juice bars and the yoga studios and the vegan food? Why is it happening now all of a sudden?
I tell you what, I wish I knew the answer because I've been here I've been here all my life. I wish we had the Whole Foods back in the 70s instead of having.
But they're saying we're not good enough for that stuff.
And what Jason is saying is that
why? I want to hear what Jason says. Why?
I think that's very easy to explain. The reason for that is take a look at who owns it. If you're going to have it, you're going to have to do it yourself. Black people have outsourced our economy. We have to outsource our economic base. And this is what you will end up with. So those things are bulwarks for white people to say, hey, you can come to this area, but they're the ones who want it. They're the ones pushing for that. In our film, we make the point that what is the black agenda? If you want to know the black agenda, go ask white people, because we as a people do not actually have an economic truly an agenda, period, but especially an economic agenda. We don't have one. There are 40 million black people in America, and if you ask them what should we be doing, you will get 40 million different answers, and that's why you can't get a Whole Foods or a yoga studio. We have all got to be on the same page, but if we can't even agree that in an 80% geographic area that this is a black area and should be at least predominantly serving black people's interests, you're not going to get anything done if you're coy or shy about acknowledging that. You will get nothing done because Dan Gilbert and Mr. Ilyich, that argument isn't happening at their house.
Wow.
Okay, we're gonna go to another caller, DeAndre. DeAndre, good morning. Welcome to the Adolph Marco Show, Detroit in Black and White. You're on the line with Jason Black. Do you have a question or comment?
Yes, I have a comment and a question. My name is DeAndre Fuentes. I'm calling from Abu Dhabi. I'm an American citizen. I just work overseas, and I would like to say I think a lot of people should learn. Black people in the city should learn how to invest in commercial property, and once they learn that, then they have that resource where they can insulate themselves for protection. And I just wanted to make that comment. And for the lawyers, later on, I was wondering if you can touch on prosecutorial misconduct of a district attorney. That's all.
We're running out of time. But, one thing, I do want Jason to tell us about where people can see his film and how much the tickets cost, and is there going to be any talk before or after the film? Because, this is a dialogue that is of great interest to people in the city of Detroit and beyond.
Well, definitely that's good also. Briefly, if I can say before I get to that,
sure.
Do not take care of your economy. If we as black people do not make that a priority, because I watched Dr. Claude Anderson get run out of on a rail in Detroit, and then a decade later they go into bankruptcy. If we as black people don't concentrate on that, you can forget buying commercial real estate. You're just saying another way of saying we need to get our economic act together.
Right.
We need to get our money together.
Right.
You don't do that, nothing happens. The politicians, the courts, the presidency, all of that becomes out of your reach if you are the poorest people on earth. That is, everything else is a non-starter.
The fighting this, people always think you can't fight the banks and you can't fight the system. But when the foreclosure epidemic first started, the first thing we raised in 2007, when the foreclosure epidemic started, is actually Granholm, if you remember, was going around the state doing these town hall meetings about how bad the economic crisis. Well, I got into one of them, and during the meeting, she asked, gave all these things about how Detroit, Michigan had been hit with all the industry shutting down and all this stuff. So she opened it up and said, well, what would you do if you were governor? And then she called on me, and I said the first thing I would do is declare a state of economic emergency. Because we have a combination of both an economic crisis that's dispossessing people as well as the predatory lending in the cities, and that if you declare an economic emergency, there's historic precedent that you could put a moratorium on all foreclosures. And in fact, in the 1930s, we had a 5-year moratorium on foreclosures. They could not foreclose, and it was upheld by both the Michigan Supreme Court and by the U.S. Supreme Court. There's a famous case, Home Loan Association versus Blight, and it's still good law. It's never been overturned. It said in a period of crisis, the right of the people to survive supersedes the contract clause of the Constitution. Well, I raised it to Granholm in 2007. Now imagine if she put a moratorium on in 2007. How many homes? Detroit wouldn't look like it does now.
There's no such thing as a nonviolent revolution. The only kind of revolution that's nonviolent is the Negro Revolution. The only revolution based on loving your enemy is the Negro Revolution. That's no revolution. A revolution is bloody. Revolution is hostile. Revolution knows no compromise. Revolution overturns and destroys everything that gets in its way. And you sitting around here like a knot on the wall saying I'm going to love these folks no matter how much they hate me.
You call us savages and beasts and mad dogs running the street burning and looting, but we're doing this not for the destruction of the world, but we're trying to prove one point. We want freedom and justice and equality. We want to be treated equal. The best thing to do is give us freedom or at this place a riot with blood.
Here in Detroit, a city of war.